everybody. I'm Brian Enton filling in for Chris Cuomo tonight. Yesterday, Donald Trump officially became the first president convicted of not just one, not two, but 34 felony charges, causing many to wonder what Trump's defense team should have done differently to avoid the conviction. This morning, Trump himself railed against the verdict, but said he does wish that his defense had done one thing differently. Take a look at what he said.
I wanted to testify. The theory is you never testify, because as soon as you testify, anybody, if it were George Washington, don't testify, because they'll get you on something that you said slightly wrong, and then they sue you for perjury. But the judge allowed them to go into everything that I was ever involved in, not this case, everything that I was ever involved in. Was he a bad boy here? Was he a bad boy there? And my lawyer said, what do you need to go through? And all you wanted to do is testify simply on this case. Because I would have loved to have testified. To this day, I would have liked to have testified.
All right, so should Trump have testified in his own defense? And what else could his lawyers have done differently to change the outcome in all of this? Some say he should have admitted to his affair with Stormy Daniels. Would that have made a difference? Would the jurors have appreciated it? Let's ask former New York City prosecutor Paul Callan and defense attorney Mark Geragos. Both of them joining us now. Appreciate both of you being with us tonight. All right, Paul, I want to start with you. A lot of people questioning whether or not they made the right decision not putting Trump on the stand. What do you think, Paul? You think he should have testified?
Oh, no, it would have been a complete disaster. He probably would have been led away in handcuffs if he testified. And the one thing to remember, Trump is saying, his attorneys prevented him from testifying. There's a rule in criminal law. The one decision in a criminal case that's absolutely reserved to the defendant himself is whether or not to testify. And every criminal lawyer sits down. He may give him some recommendations, but ultimately any defendant who wants to testify can testify. And as a matter of fact, in this case, the judge looked down at Trump and said to him, you have the right to testify. And that was because, remember, Trump went out and gave a press conference saying that the gag order was preventing him from testifying. The judge said, no, the gag order has nothing to do with your right to testify. So that's a misrepresentation and simply untrue. So I don't think it would have made a difference. He would have been convicted anyway.
Well, today, Trump said that he wanted to testify, but that it was his lawyers who advised him that it was a bad idea and that he shouldn't have done it. What do you think, Mark? Would that have been your advice?
Well, look, I often invoke my father, and my father used to say it's a rare criminal case that gets better for the defense after the prosecution rests. His best appellate issue, in my humble opinion, is right as this case was going on, in a 4-3 decision, the highest court in New York State reversed Harvey Weinstein. One of the bases for the reversal of that conviction was that the trial judge, who's no longer on the bench in New York, had in that case said to Harvey Weinstein, at the prosecution's behest, if you take the stand, I'm going to let in all kinds of other stuff. This judge in this case did the exact same thing. So his lawyer, Todd Blanche, made the right decision. He said, and Trump articulated it exactly right, if he had taken the stand and just been able to testify as to this discrete charge or 34 charges that he was charged with, he would have taken the stand. No lawyer was going to let him get up there and have him cross-examined on every other piece of extraneous evidence that had nothing to do with this case, but basically was the character assassination block. My opinion, if this case gets reversed, that's going to be one of the things that they hang their hat on, because there's now precedent in New York State, and it'll lead the appeal.
Interesting you bring up the appeal, Mark. We were looking up the stats earlier. In New York, 4.5% chance of a criminal conviction being overturned. So the chances aren't good overall. Paul, what do you think, though? I mean, because they keep talking about the appeal, and that's going to be the saving grace here. Is there something different about this case that will increase the chances?
There are a lot of things that are different about this case that increases his chance to get this reversed on appeal. And I agree completely with Mark about the Weinstein example. of something that will be helpful to the Trump appeal. But there are many other things. For instance, to make this felony charge, they had to link a misdemeanor falsification of business records, to another crime. One of the crimes they linked it to was a federal election law crime. That's never been done in the history of New York. Why? Because the citizens of New York didn't pass that law. That was passed by the federal government and Congress. And so to link that to a New York law, very, very unusual. Also, there's a provision of the Constitution of the state of New York, which says that when you try to incorporate another law into an existing law, you have to include the entire content of that law in the new law as it's published in New York. That was not done with any of these laws that he's linked to, because remember, this became a felony by linking it to the federal election law, but the judge said you could also look at the state tax law, the state of New York's election law, and you could look also at federal tax law. So all of these things were thrown at the jury as possible links that turned a misdemeanor, a very minor crime, into a very serious felony. So all of those things will be on the table when an appellate court looks at it. There's a lot that can be offered here by the Trump forces to get a reversal in this case.
Yeah, we already know that they're going to appeal. I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah, they're not only are they going to appeal, but they've got this. One judge once said to me very famously that during a trial, that this case is an appellate lawyer's petri dish, and I will adopt that same line for this case. Not only do you have a crime that wasn't defined and literally should not have had jurisdiction by a New York state court, but you've also got intertwined with that. How do you revive a statute of limitations on an expired misdemeanor by an undefined felony? And when Paul brings up the constitutional argument, the state constitutional argument, that just makes it even stronger that this couldn't be a stronger due process violation in terms of when you're charged with a crime, you're supposed to be able to know what it is. You're supposed to be able to define it and be given notice. This goes against the very principles of criminal law.
And by the way, to be clear,
you both agree on that. He's got a great case for it.
I'm not necessarily on the Geragos team here and saying he will get a reversal on appeal, because there's something you have to remember about appellate judges. Or I shouldn't say this because I've got cases that are on appeal myself, but they're political animals as well as legal animals. And he is not a very popular individual in the state of New York. And although Mark raises good points, and I think I put some pretty good ones on the table too, that will be discussed, who knows what these appellate judges will do ultimately. But there's certainly some good arguments to be made for a reversal.
Yeah, and in terms of his legal team and whether or not they made the right decisions, I mean, both of you know this. It's so easy to go Monday morning quarterback everything now. But everybody's sort of questioning today if Trump had come clean about an affair with Stormy, and if that was part of the defense and they said, look, this did happen, would that have maybe changed things? Would the jury have appreciated that and maybe trusted him a little bit more? What do you think, Mark?
Look, Brian, I told Chris, and if you had asked me, I would have told you before this case started, this case was lost in jury selection. The fact that it was in Manhattan, I don't practice in the state court there in criminal cases for one reason and one reason only. You have to understand this is a unique court. This is a unique populace that is the jury population there, and there was no way that he was ever going to get an acquittal. I mean, the best day on his case would have been a hung jury. That was the best possibility. I said it going in. I haven't changed my mind about that. I just think this jury would have taken one more day. The fact that they took 2 days, I think, is relatively quick given the length and the number of counts.
But you know, Mark, he made his situation much worse by constantly attacking the judge, first of all. Every day he marches out of the courtroom, and right outside of the door, he starts lacing into the judge as being corrupt and attacking the judge's family. And then he doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
He starts attacking the jury.
But listen,
and then he attacks the court system every single day.
But I mean, if it's the jury, it's the jury who convicted him, Paul. Do you think him attacking the judge upset the jurors? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, absolutely it did. The judge is the guardian of the jury. Juries generally love judges, and this judge has a very nice demeanor with the jury. And also, he attacked the jury in many of those press conferences. Now, bear in mind, they're under oath not to be reading the newspaper or watching television. But I'm telling you, who's to say one of their neighbors didn't say, wow, I heard what Trump had to say about the jury. So you don't antagonize the judge. You don't antagonize the most important audience, the jury. It's insane.
Yeah, or they just check their phones. I mean, and weren't they sent home for a week too? They sent them home for a week. You really don't think any of them looked at their phone or heard from a neighbor? I mean, come on.
Yes,
so
they should have been sequestered.
The
fact that they weren't sequestered, they should have been sequestered. There's no way in the world you should have tried this case with an unsequestered jury. It was just, and I've said that before this started. This isn't Monday morning quarterbacking. There was no way he was going to get a trial where you were going to have this analyzed on the facts. Mind you, I'm not ascribing malice to any of the jurors. What I'm telling you is, and I've said this before, you do not change jurors who have lived on this earth 30, 40, 50, 60 years. You don't change their worldview in the span of 4 to 6 weeks. They come to a case, they've got whatever issues and baggage they've got. They're going to view the case through that. And if you are he's got a point, and I disagree wholeheartedly with Trump on most of the issues, but he's got a point. It was 95% Democrat. It was a jury that was predestined for guilt to begin with. He had no shot. This case was over in jury selection.
And what you just said, Mark, I think is so interesting, is so many people who disagree with Trump and don't like Trump, even now after the conviction, are still questioning this trial and questioning whether it was really fair, which I think is just fascinating, because normally all those folks just hate on Trump all the time. Mark Geragos, Paul Callan, thank you both for coming on. Mark, don't go anywhere, because you've got a special appearance this weekend that we want to talk about in a couple of minutes. So you stay put, but we appreciate you both coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, throughout the trial, Trump was often surrounded by GOP leaders. There was vice presidential hopefuls. All the political people were right there by his side. They put out statements constantly. His sons, Eric and Don Jr., and even Tiffany Trump, they made an appearance. There was a lot of support from those folks. But the two women that the former president is arguably the absolute closest to, his wife Melania and his daughter Ivanka, they were absent, you may have noticed, throughout the entire trial, and they were radio silent on social media through all of it until the end. And after Trump was convicted, Ivanka did finally post on her Instagram story. It was a short message. You may have noticed it yesterday. It is right there. We're going to put it up for you. It said, "I love you, Dad." It was an Instagram story that he put up in a photo of them together. So what are we supposed to make of what feels like this icy treatment by the most important women in Trump's life? I want to ask the author of Mar-a-Lago, Inside the Gates of Power, at Donald Trump's presidential palace, Lawrence Leamer, joins us live now. Lawrence, thank you for being with us. You know, I don't know what to think here. I kind of feel bad even talking about this because, you know, did they have to go? Maybe Trump told them to stay back and, I don't want you involved in all of this. You know, I hate to read into it too much, but a lot of people are questioning why Melania and Ivanka were never there. What do you make of it, Lawrence?
Well, don't you think they realize what everybody's thinking? I mean, they are these astute political creatures who have been in this psychodrama for decades. I mean, from Melania, it's just amazing emotionally she can even put up with this after all this time.
So you think it was by design?
I've seen her
exactly
Mar-a-Lago.
What they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, look, what is her life now? Her parents are gone. Her son's going off to college. Her husband is a serial philanderer. At Mar-a-Lago, she goes to the beauty parlor, and the rest of the time she's with herself. It's a sad life, no matter what veneer she puts on it and the image she tries to project.
In a sense, though, does it show strength from Melania that she, you see other spouses and women and men too will stand by their lover and go up there and stand there, and everybody just sort of feels bad for the person, and that almost looks weak in a way. Does it show her strength that Melania said, you know what, I'm not going?
Well, remember when Hillary said, "I'm not a stand by your woman kind of man kind of woman," but she was, and that's what Melania is too. And in some ways, it's admirable. After all, she's had to put up with him. But in some ways, it's simply incredible. But she wanted to marry a rich man. She married him, and she paid the price.
What about Ivanka? Because her and Jared were so close to Trump, obviously, during the last presidency, working in the White House. They've taken a step back. We haven't seen them campaigning. She didn't make any comments during the trial. And I did notice that her comment on social media was an Instagram story, which you can't comment on as a person who follows her, and it also goes away after 24 hours. I mean, what do you think is going on with Ivanka right now?
Well, they just wanted to get away. The pressures of that first term were just overwhelming. All the drama, all the controversy. They wanted to have a life for themselves and for their children. And who could blame them?
Yeah, it's a good point. Who could blame them? And, there's a lot going on with that family right now. It'll be interesting to see whether they are a little more visible at some of the rallies that are coming up and as the campaign really heats up. Lawrence Lemur, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, still to come tonight, who can forget? It's the horrible, horrible video of 6-year-old Corey Maciolo being forced to run over and over again on a treadmill by his father, Christopher Greger. He even bit Corey in the head when he fell off of the treadmill. Chris has covered this closely. It's made all of us so mad. Corey ended up dead just weeks later, where Greger was charged with his murder. And just hours ago, the verdict came in. Was justice served? Corey's family joins me live. That's coming up next.
As to count 1, endangering the welfare of a child.
Guilty.
2, how do you find as to count 2, murder?
Not guilty.
3, how do you find as to the charge of aggravated manslaughter?
Guilty.
And you did not answer question 4?
No, sir.
The emotion there. That was the verdict that came down today in the murder trial of Christopher Greger, accused of killing his 6-year-old son, Corey Maciolo, who we all saw, this awful video, being forced by his father to run over and over again on a treadmill. The jury found Greger guilty of aggravated manslaughter and endangering the welfare of a child. Here is what Corey's mother, Brianna, had to say after the verdict was read.
I think we feel sad but happy at the same time because he deserves to be in jail. He's a very bad man, and we're just happy with the verdict. DCPMP is going to be held responsible, as well as Chris.
All right, so Corey's grandfather, Vito Micciolo, joins me live now. Vito, I'm so sorry for everything that your family has been through. This has just been heart-wrenching for all of us to follow along with during the trial, and we've all thought about Corey so much. What was your reaction to the verdict, Vito?
It was bittersweet. I thought he should have got the murder charge, but I'll take that charge. Again, it was bittersweet. It's tough because at the end of the day, there's still my grandson's gone, and we can't bring him back. And this guy here is just, what a beautiful kid. This guy's a monster, and we fought it. We fought, like my daughter said, DCPMP for years, and they didn't want to believe us. No matter what we did and said, they didn't want to believe us up to the end, where I felt that the system, when my daughter took him to the hospital and had him checked out, and he finally admitted, because he was afraid to say anything to anybody because he knew the repercussions or what would happen to him. They should have never phoned him and told him that they know. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I know. I think one of the things that's upset us all the most, Vito, is, the state doing nothing. I mean, the fact that there were 100 calls, allegations of abuse, that he wasn't taken away, that little Corey was in this situation. Do you think that they should be held criminally, accountable for this in terms of some of these social workers and everyone who dropped the ball?
Absolutely. I mean, I could tell you story after story after story. We called. We said, this is what happened. This is what Corey told us. These are the marks on his body. And it seemed like they wanted to believe the father and son, the father who was some big wig in the state troopers in New Jersey and had some political power, versus the little people who our voice didn't matter, no matter what we said.
Yeah, you're talking about Corey's other grandfather, right? There's been this talk that he was high up with the state patrol and that you guys were just ignored through all of this, and that this could have been prevented. I'm assuming you knew Christopher. I mean, I've watched him every day in that trial, and it makes you mad to see him sitting there. I mean, what was he like? What was your impression of him?
He was an angry person. I mean, a very angry person. I mean, one of the run-ins I had was up in North Jersey at the courthouse, which was a custody hearing. And I had gotten there. I told my daughter I would be there for that hearing. And I went into the restroom, and I'm washing my hands, and this guy came out of the stall, and it was Chris in a suit. And I said, "Hey, Chris, you remember me? I haven't seen him in a while." Corey's grandfather. And all of a sudden, white trash, you're this, you're that, all kinds of negative, bad things. I'm like, all right, whatever, no big deal. And he kept screaming at me, so I'm going to walk out the door. The door pulled in to walk out. And as I'm going through, he grabbed the door and tried to slam it on me as I'm walking through. And it started getting louder, and being a man, I'm like, all right, just, enough's enough. Brianna and heard it in the hallway, and other people, then she come running down and kind of broke it up. But it's just to show his anger. And then when we were leaving the courtroom, he followed us out. We got in our cars. I met with my daughter. We were going to grab something to eat. He was walking around, crossing the street, and walked right to the side of the car and just started going off. I'm the one that popped your daughter's tire, your wife's tires. My ex-wife at the time, ex-wife now, popped her tires. I did this, I did that. Admitting to everything. And it was like he was a Jekyll and Hyde type guy. You know what I mean? I'm a guy, I went to school, I got my master's degree, I'm white collar, I wear a tie. But when nobody's looking, he's a very evil person. Very evil.
Well, and he probably didn't know, Vito, that camera was up there in that gym. I mean, all you have to do is watch that surveillance video and see what he did to that little boy. And the rest, I think, is crystal clear. And he probably didn't know the camera was there. I'm sure that video was very important in the end to the jury's decision. Vito, we really appreciate you coming on. Our heart goes out to you and your family. And I hope you guys get justice when it comes to, the breakdown with the state, because I think that's the next step here.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys supporting the fight. And we have to make a change somehow in the system, because the system's failing way too many kids. Children should not be dying because they don't know how to make a decision or what to do. These people aren't properly trained.
All right. We'll stay on it. We're going to talk about it now. We're actually going to bring in two experts to help us sort of break that down. I want to bring in Florida prosecutor Dave Ehrenberg and also NewsNation legal analyst Sarah Azari to continue the conversation. First of all, you heard Vito bring it up, so I want to ask you, Sarah, why did they go for the manslaughter charge and not the murder charge? Because when you watch that video and you think about this little boy, you want murder. Why manslaughter?
Yeah, Brian, because this case was overcharged, okay? The murder charge was not supported. There simply wasn't enough evidence to support malice murder, second degree, and there certainly was no evidence to support first degree premeditated murder. So manslaughter was always the right charge, and the prosecutors did the right thing by asking for this lesser instruction when they arrested. I think the defense should have objected to it, but it gave the jury an ability to find him guilty of some sort of homicide, which is, I think, the appropriate charge. And to your point, there was such great disdain, for Gregor by this jury that even Dr. Bodden couldn't turn this around. I mean, it's clear, obviously, by this verdict. And so you're talking about the Treadmill video, you're talking about photos of bruising. All of this sort of swayed the jury against him to where they absolutely wanted him convicted of some form of homicide. And because of the lack of evidence to support a malice charge, then they went with manslaughter. And I think this is the correct verdict.
Dave, I go back to the 100 calls to Child Protective Services, the fact that nothing was done, that they were ignored. Is that criminal? Should someone be held criminally responsible? Does that ever happen?
Brian, the incompetence of government employees is rarely criminal. You'd have to show something more, something intentional, or something so reckless that it pierces the immunity that government employees get. Sadly, these offices are underfunded around the country, and you see these tragedies, and then there's calls for reform, but rarely does anyone go to jail. So I think it's doubtful. There will be lots of civil suits, and there's already one here, and someone's going to have to pay, but nothing can bring this child back. And I want to add something. I agree with everything Sarah said. I do think that it was going to be an uphill battle to get first-degree murder because the prosecutors said that the Treadmill incident did not cause the death of the child. It was blunt force trauma, so it occurred afterwards. But the jury clearly hated this guy, and they wanted him to go to prison. And when they saw that video, that guy's goose was cooked, and so they went for the highest charge that could be sustained based on the evidence.
Let me just add something to it.
You say, Dave, though, that it had... Well, hold on. I want to say one quick thing to Dave, because he said that it would have to be something so reckless for a government employee to be charged, but the kid is dead. I mean, if you're going to have a case where you go after people who drop the ball, wouldn't this be the case, Dave?
It could be, but again, you have a level of government sovereign immunity with these government employees, and so just being incompetent isn't enough. It's got to be so terrible where literally they're being told and they're shown videos and they refuse to do anything and they sit on their hands. So it's always a possibility, but don't expect it. Those cases are so rare. The person who will go to prison for it is right there on the screen, the defendant.
Yeah. Sarah, do you think the defense made a mistake not putting the dad on the stand? Because it's almost like you needed some kind of explanation, I feel like, as a juror when you see this awful video.
That's exactly what I was going to say. In the face of all of these bad facts and the fact that this guy was a monster, the jury heard nothing that mitigated that, right? And the only person that could have introduced those facts was Gregor. And I think the intention was to put him on the stand. Of course, it's his right, or, to take the stand or not. It's his choice. But he made that stupid call to his mother from the jail, and that boxed him into a decision not to take. Right. So, but look, the Treadmill video,
I know about that.
I know that we can't all watch it to the end, but if you do keep watching it, you actually see him decreasing the speed again. And of course, there's no audio to that video. So somebody needed to explain that video. The driving around state to state, nonchalantly dropping the kid off at the ER, text messages, online searches. He had to explain those things. He wasn't able to do that because he made that stupid mistake of coaching his mother on the jail call. So I think this was a case where he, despite his criminal record, he has an assault record, he should have taken the stand but couldn't.
Yeah, I forgot about that he actually called, his mom was going to testify, and he called his mom and tried to coach her before she testified, which then the prosecution was going to bring up if he testified, which would have been really, really bad, made him look even worse. Just an awful case. I feel so badly for that family. Dave Ehrenberg, Sarah Azari, thank you both so much for coming on. I hope you have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, still to come tonight, could Bryan Kohberger have a rock-solid alibi? The man charged with slaughtering 4 young Idaho college students, he was back in court. Kohberger's defense brought in a witness that they claim could help support Kohberger's alibi, that he was nowhere near the house at the time the murders took place. We're going to take you inside the courtroom. It's one of the hearings I found to be the most interesting since all of this began. We're going to break it down next. The man accused of slaughtering 4 Idaho college students actually have a rock-solid alibi. Brian Kohberger was back in court yesterday, and this time his lawyers called in an expert witness that they say could prove that Kohberger was nowhere near the crime scene. Part of the case against Kohberger, of course, he's relied on this cell phone tracking the prosecutors say traces his route to the house where the murders took place. But digital forensics expert Cy Ray, that's his name, he testified that there is important data missing. Here's what he said in court.
I've had a concern since the very first day I saw the cast draft report that there are significant errors in the drive testing. It was before I even saw the drive testing. I can look at the coverage areas and I can tell you they're wrong. Looking at what's been produced, probably 2 or 3% is missing, but it's not the amount of data or the time of the data, it's the locations of the data. Some of the most significant locations in this case were missing some data. Unfortunately, that mistake has a ripple effect, and I'm seeing multiple errors that are happening as a result.
Okay, so how big of a deal is this really? Because oftentimes defense experts make a big deal out of things that really isn't that important. So we need to find out. I want to bring in digital forensics analyst Joseph Caruso and also attorney Ariva Martin. All right, Joseph and Ariva, thank you both for being with us. Joseph, let me start with you. This was like a 3-hour hearing. A lot of it went above my head when it comes to this cell phone stuff because they talk about all the technical data. But the expert there was clear that he says there's important information missing that may actually help Kohberger. Do you buy it, Joseph?
I don't buy it. First of all, thanks for having me. I think that what he's talking about, or I know what he's talking about, is actually the drive testing data. So initially, law enforcement got the call record data, the call detail records, the CDRs, and they're not disputing those CDRs are incorrect. The drive testing is used to validate the CDR records. So the drive testing, the law enforcement goes out with specialized equipment and software. They drive the route. They gather data on the cell phone towers, their strengths, their coverage, different things like that. And that helps to validate the call records. I think that if that data is missing because there was a malfunction in the equipment, I haven't seen any of the data that they have. But 2% of the data in the grand scheme of things, he's talking about I think he said somewhere in 500,000 lines of data, and there's 2 to 3% missing. You know, I think it's very easy to go back through the call details and go and match them up to the physical events. So I'm not really buying it, no. I think that it's important to do the drive testing, but I don't see anyone disputing the accuracy of the actual. I see no one, disputing the CDRs. So I'm not buying that this is,
Yeah, it's interesting you say. It's interesting you say you don't buy it, Joseph, because I was out there through most of it in terms of when they were trying to catch Kohberger and the whole investigation, and they had this massive FBI mobile unit, and the FBI agents we know were part of tracking down the cell phone data and putting it all together. So, I was sitting there listening to this hearing, Ariva, thinking, does this expert really know better than the FBI? Because he made it seem so bad, but I guess this is sort of what defense experts do, Ariva?
Well, this expert has a particular history. First of all, he has primarily testified in cases for the prosecution. He has about 100 or so cases that he's been involved in, typically as an expert, though, for the district attorney. In this case, he is an expert that's been hired and retained by the defendant in the case. But there's also been questions about the technology that he used, the method that he uses to make his determinations. And some courts have literally refused to allow his evidence, his testimony, to be used to make a determination about whether a cell phone was in a particular location. So there's some questions about the credibility and the reliability of the algorithm that is used by this particular expert. But it's important to note, this is not the trial. This is still a preliminary hearing. And this is still a determination that has to be made by the judge if there's probable cause. And this expert has said he has real doubts about whether the alibi or the lack of, he has real doubts about the prosecution's case. And he says that the algorithm and the data that he's reviewed supports the alibi of the defendant, that he wasn't near the location of the murders at the time that these murders took place. I'm not so certain that's going to be enough, though, to prevent this case from moving forward to trial. There's other evidence that the prosecution has, like DNA evidence, like surveillance video of the vehicle that was seen near the scene of the murder. So I think after all of the evidence is introduced, this judge is likely to still move forward, and this case is going to proceed to trial.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the point, Ariva, that we're not in the trial phase yet, because I've kind of wondered what's been going on with these pretrial hearings where they take so much time with these witnesses and we're not even in the trial yet. And I noticed the prosecution doesn't really fight back much, doesn't even really ask many questions of these defense witnesses. Like, is this unusual that this is all being drawn out like this?
It's very unusual, and the families are incredibly frustrated. They are frustrated because they said that this is, this should have been moving along a lot further, that they should be a lot further along in the process, that the trial in this case should have already been set, and they should be in the thick of the trial. What we keep seeing in this case is the defense arguing that they don't have evidence and the prosecution arguing that we've given you all the evidence that we have. But the judge is clearly not taking control of the calendar and forcing the parties to move this case to trial.
Joseph, you've worked on a lot of these cases. I mean, I know that you focus mainly on the cell phone data. But with everything you know when it comes to that kind of technology, I mean, is this a stall tactic if you're saying that that you don't really see an issue with the data? Like, why are they going? Is this all that they have, basically? Because like Ariva mentioned, they've got DNA on the knife sheath. They've got surveillance video. Is this all they have to go after?
I haven't seen all of the data. I haven't seen all of the evidence. But I think that this is pretty weak. Saying that the drive data is missing and they're not validating their findings. Technology today and even back in 2022, the cell data that we receive, things like the timing advance data, which is used for E911 to locate where a 911 calls from, it's pretty accurate. Is there issues? There are sometimes. But we have physical data that correlates. I mean, I understand there was his license plate was caught by a plate reader, on the route in the time in question, right? I mean, all of this stuff adds up to the cell data is more likely than not accurate. The drive testing would probably not change that at all.
When you mentioned, there's surveillance video, so we'll see how this plays out. But I was confused. It was so technical during the hearing, so I'm glad we got your opinion on it. Joseph Caruso and Ariva Martin, as always, it's nice to see you. Thank you both for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, still to come tonight, if you are a true crime fan, I don't have to tell you how big a deal CrimeCon is. And I know because I'm actually at CrimeCon right now. You can't tell because we have this little secret studio, but I'm here now. I've been here all day, and coming up, I meet with Ashley Banfield. We're going to give you a sneak peek of what really goes on here. All right, this is CrimeCon in Nashville. Thousands and thousands of true crime fans from all over the world. There's booths for podcasts and everything you can imagine. And this is the NewsNation booth right over here. You see you got Marnie Hughes. There I am. Ashley Banfield. A lot of people stopping by. Speaking of Ashley Banfield,
hello.
Let me interrupt you real quick.
How are you? Hi.
CrimeCon, what do you think so far?
It's very, very busy. And I'll tell you one thing I really like. I love the dedication to victims.
Yeah.
Everybody here wants to know how people are doing, what's their mission after they've gone through some traumatic experience, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the thing. When I first heard CrimeCon, I thought, like, is it kind of jokey? Is it like a Comic-Con? But it's actually serious. The victims are here, the police are here, the prosecutors, and you've got your big show, which is from CrimeCon tonight,
yes.
10 o'clock Eastern. What should we expect?
Yes. So this is what I mean. John Ramsey, the dad of John Benet Ramsey, he talks about being here at CrimeCon and how kind everyone is to him, how he feels really loved and supported. And if you think about it, if you're the victim of a crime, you're alone in your grief for so much of your life, right? Especially someone like him who's never gotten justice. No one's ever been found, right, for the murder of John Benet. And so that's one of the really interesting interviews. I asked him if he thinks about John Benet today. He told me she'd be 34. And we talked a little bit about imagining.
Crazy, 34.
I know.
Oh my God.
34 years old. We talked about if he imagines what she looks like. He bumped into a friend of hers recently at age 30, and it's just very interesting to hear how he contemplates life without her and what she would have been in his eyes. He has some visions for what she would have achieved.
Well, we can't wait for the show tonight. It's always so good to see you in person, too, by the way, not through the TV screen.
Right?
Her show, 9 o'clock Eastern, and NewsNation booth if you happen to be in Nashville. Look, there's a little bit of fun out here, too. You can even get your fake mug shot out here. So this is CrimeCon. All right, I'm back with criminal defense attorney Mark Geragos, one of the big stars of CrimeCon. Mark, listen, you're going to need like a bodyguard when you get here, trust me, because you're going to be so popular. You've got the Scott Peterson panel with Laura Ingle, and you tweeted out a surprise guest. What can we expect?
Well, I was going to bring with me Dusty, but, you know, Dusty is a special guest. But I'm going to, on the panel, I will have somebody who is in custody call in. So I'll leave it at that, and will be the first time they've talked in quite a while. So I'll leave it at that, and that'll be the kind of teaser, if you will, before CrimeCon.
Is the last name Peterson or Menendez? Can you say who's going to call in?
You're in the universe. You've got the universe. There you go.
Okay. Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to go to that panel. I'm also going to come say hi to you, Mark. I'll see you soon. You probably need to get on a plane soon. Speaking of Dusty, we all tried to get her to leave. We tried to get her to leave that studio. I wanted her to visit me in Florida, but she stays in New York. She's comfortable there. But make sure to check out Ashley's show, 10 o'clock Eastern tonight. Sorry, go ahead real quick, Mark.
There are those who speculate, by the way, there's those who speculate, by the way, that Dusty is actually under house arrest. So, you know, and that, which is appropriate for CrimeCon. So
yeah, Chris keeps her like that. We're out of time. Chris keeps her there. She's not allowed to leave that control room. All right, Mark, I'll see you soon. We'll be right back.
See you.